Recording has begun. Good evening. This is the March 25, 2025 special meeting of the Complaint Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force of the City and County of San Francisco. The time is 5:31 p.m. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force and its committees convene in hybrid meetings that allow for either in-person attendance or remote participation. Public comment will be taken on each item of the agenda. Meeting decorum. Any member of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force may call for decorum due to the disorderly conduct of meeting participants. Persons who engage in threatening and/or menacing behavior may be asked to leave. Chair Schmidt, that completes my announcements.
Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead, go down the list. Number one first.
Item 1, call to order, roll call, and agenda changes. We are aware of no requests for agenda changes this evening.
And I don't think we need to change anything. Looks good to me.
All right, taking the roll call. Chair Yankee. Stein.
Not here.
Good heavens. Chair Schmidt.
Present.
Chair Schmidt, present. Vice Chair Stein. Vice Chair Stein, present. Member Sugarman. Member Sugarman, absent. 1 absent, 2 present. We have a quorum.
Great. Number 2, please.
Item 2, approval of the February 18, 2025 Complaint Committee meeting minutes.
Member Stein, any further edits on the minutes? Nothing from me. I'll move to approve.
Moved by Chair Schmidt, seconded by Vice Chair Stein. Public comment?
I didn't actually like it, but I do.
Seconded by Vice Chair Stein.
Oh, he's here.
Public comment?
Yes, please.
Anyone in the room wishing to make public comment on item 2, please approach the podium. If you're in the online community, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. I'll give you a moment. We have no hands raised, no one approaching the podium. Taking the vote.
Okay, vote, please.
Chair Schmidt.
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Vice Chair Stein.
Aye.
Vice Chair Stein, aye. Member Sugarman. Member Sugarman absent. 2 ayes, 1 absent. Motion passes.
Number 3, please.
Item 3, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. If you're in the room and would like to make public comment, please approach the podium. Members of the online community, raise your hand in the app or press *3. We have no one approaching the podium, no one with their hand raised.
All right, number 4, please.
Item number 4, hearing on Complaint Committee administration. Discuss role in advancing expansion of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force role per Administrative Code, Sunshine Ordinance, Section 67.30, authorizations.
Okay, on number 4, I think we in this committee generally have our full discussions when we have 3 members here. I am open to discussions on this item. It's a continuing item, and I think we're basically trying to create some ideas for the whole task force from this committee. and it's in process. I think the last meeting where we had three, we made a lot of progress. I'll ask Member Stein if Member Stein has anything that she wants to bring up here on number 4 today.
Yeah, I do have one small thing.
Thank you.
This is related to the last time we discussed this item, that we had talked about developing a SOTF mailing list for local media. And I think I had emailed with you and I had asked Chair Yankee to put it on the agenda, but in our last meeting, he said the agenda was already too full and he would put it on the next. But I am wondering, because when I reviewed on a separate matter, I reviewed Pat's additions to like what had happened with certain cases where we had asked for certain things. And you mentioned, Ms. Peterson, that the clerk's office already has a mailing list that would include, I guess, some kind of subsection or some kind of way to parse out for the SOTF who might be on that mailing list. But I'm wondering, therefore, going forward with this item, is this something that a mailing list that our administrator would handle, or does it always have to go through the clerk's office? Because that really, in my experience, slows things down a lot and would not make it very newsworthy if we were trying to alert media to things that were decided here that we thought were of potential interest. So I'm just kind of wondering like what to do with the fact that maybe the clerk's office already has something. But interestingly, when this case came up a year ago, nobody said the clerk's office already has something. And we were telling the petitioner that we don't have an emailing list. So.
Okay. So there, you could say that a year ago, we were acting without full knowledge, because that mailing list, we could have just said, well, that's our mailing list, as a sort of like a backup plan, since we believe we don't have our own mailing list. I think that's a great answer and question.
Yeah, I mean, I would love clarification from the clerk's office about what exists and whether we can even have something that that would be our own list that our administrator could send out messages if so instructed by the board.
I think we should push on that. I mean, that is to me, what I'm hoping for are items where it's specific enough that we can sort of come up with a sort of a flow chart on how to get it in place. And that sounds like, to me, it's something that is doable. Let's see. Yeah, we've got to make inquiry, I agree, to the clerk's office. And maybe we should say that we're going to make that inquiry through our administrator about one, what is generally the nature of the mailing list that the clerk's office maintains, and I guess two, would we have the ability to send things out through that mailing list? And lastly, we may prefer that we have our own separate mailing list with our administrator, primarily for many reasons, but primarily because of expedition, let's say, speed, because we really do want to try to be as prompt as possible when there is something that is newsworthy or time sensitive, let's say.
My apologies. I just want to clarify, what clerk of the board mailing list are we referring to?
I don't know if you want to
This is
clarify.
Victor.
Ms. Peterson, yes.
Victor, I was talking about the list of members of the media that we contact when there is a special meeting.
Yes, that is purely pursuant to the Sunshine Code for special meetings, and that for any time there's a special meeting, we have to provide a list to subscribers of any changes to the regular schedule. If we're working on another list for just informational purposes, I believe the task force should probably maintain it themselves, so we can keep those separate.
Thank you, Victor.
And is there any impediment to doing that? Do we need some kind of, go ahead on that, or is that something we can just
We
do?
can investigate that. I don't know of anything that stops us from creating a mailing list, but I would just caution in that we don't want to make the public dependent on it or commit ourselves to another process that if somebody might say, I never got an email about this and blame us for it. Now that's my only hesitation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I don't think that the idea from our perspective is that it become a comprehensive kind of use of a mailing list. I'm not quite sure what exactly we might put on a mailing list, a press mailing list. But one example might be the annual report. It would just be, and I'm just speaking off the cuff here, so I haven't put it into verbiage, but what I think we're thinking about is a way to have a channel between the task force and primarily local media, which would include things that we thought were newsworthy. There's a lot there that might need to be fleshed out, but on the other hand, I don't think the idea is anything revolutionary. I think we just
I don't see a problem with that. I get them from other boards, commissions all the time.
okay.
Youth Commission, a lot of nonprofits send them to me all the time. I get on a lot of mailing lists for some reason.
Okay.
Just we probably want to do it on a regular basis,
Mhm.
just so they know that's not missing. Maybe monthly.
It-
And of course, we want to double check this with our city
Yeah.
attorney to see if there's any limitations to what we could put in there.
Okay.
Of course,
Yeah.
develop an idea of what we want to put in there every month. And I would also want to put our monthly schedule in there also.
So Victor, what kind of communication would you need? Like, what information needs to be in there for someone to check on whether it's okay?
I would check with our own city attorneys initially. And then we can just, and we can move from there. I don't think there's anything that would prevent us, but I just want to be doubly sure.
So will you be checking and getting back to us, or do we
I
need
believe
to?
Pat can do that because I'm on the other side.
Okay.
And just one small detail there, Victor, you said something about monthly and you said something about
Well,
sort of
I think it
announcing
should
the
be a
monthly
dependable
meetings.
schedule that comes out on a regular basis, just so people know it's coming.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe we initially could.
Or bi-monthly or quarterly or something.
Yeah, we could. I want to leave the schedule as being a little bit of an open question, but it's okay with me if we think initially that it would be, say, a monthly thing. But I think we also should, stay open-minded about that. I don't want to create another thing that people get and delete. And this, that's the world today. I'm not trying to make work here at all. I think our committee has some idea that maybe there could have been created somewhere along the way a better linkage with the press to convey out things that we think might be important to them. That's the sort of the germ, at least from my own perspective. Member Stein, is that
Agree. I think
okay?
that's where the discussion was.
Yeah, and so I know that we may need to fit that into something that sounds a little more standardized, but that's the gist of what we're doing. And we're trying to, look at 6730 and figure out what can we do, what might make things better without creating an encyclopedia of to-do lists that would also probably sit on a shelf somewhere. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, on that. So anyone further on that idea? Okay. Member Stein, any other item, anything else you want to mention on number 4?
No, that was just the one thing I wanted to bring up, since it may end up on the agenda of the next meeting, or I can tell Chair Yankee we're not ready to put it on the agenda. I guess I got a little thrown when I was looking at, when I suddenly had this information that, a mailing list already
Yeah.
exists, but it seems like it's only used for notification, and that's not what we're thinking of here.
Yeah, and so that you knew something we didn't know coming in today, and Victor just made it clear that that's a very particular mailing list that's only used because it has to be sent out to comply with meeting requirements under the law for special meetings. Okay, I'm just going to mention that still number 4, but this might be the last thing, and I don't really need to talk about it. But one idea that came out from our last discussion was I think that one concept that I'm thinking about also is that we try to figure out a way to distribute to all the members of the task force so that we have sort of a implied agreement amongst each other that each of us is going to take on maybe something a little more, either your chair or your doing, an annual report, or your something that's in addition to you're on the task force and you're on a committee. Now, it could be done through the committees. I hope we have everyone on a committee at this point. It could be through the committees, or maybe we do this somehow separate. But I just want to have that as an idea that we don't remain in a situation where something is not going to happen unless someone volunteers, and then the 1 or 2 or 3 people who volunteer end up taking on all the work. I don't know how to do that, but it seems like if we all sort of committed to that idea together, then maybe people might feel that sort of collective will on this if they saw that everyone else is doing the same thing. That's just a thought I had coming out of our last discussion. Okay, if there's not anything more, I think we're ready for number 5.
Public comment?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, public comment.
Anyone wishing to make public comment on item 4? If you're in the room, please approach the podium. If you're online, raise your hand in the app or press *3 on your phone. We have no one wishing to make public comment. Item 5.
Yes, please.
Item 5, file number 24064. Complaint filed by Matt Joseph against the Department of Building Inspection for allegedly violating Administrative Code, Sunshine Ordinance, Section 67.21 sub K by failing to release documentary public information, 67.26 by failing to disclose records in their entirety, and 67.27 by failing to provide justification for the withholding of information in writing.
All right. So this is the only case we have today. Let me explain how we're going to handle it by our normal rules in this committee. To the parties, we've already received papers. On this case, I think we ended up looking at maybe 170 pages. A lot of it's duplication, but we've read the file, and we're going to give you each 3 minutes at the outset to discuss the case with us, to present the case to us with that proviso in mind, is that we're prepared. We know what the cases are about. After those presentations is sort of a questioning period where the members may ask questions to the parties or witnesses. And then the last period of time is that we deliberate on what we think we should do with the case. Now, this is a committee of the task force. The committee doesn't make final decisions. What it may do, and it often does, is look at the case and send it for a full task force hearing. In some fashion, let's say, we are going to look at some preliminary questions. Jurisdiction, sometimes jurisdiction's a question, but not that often. And does this involve public records? Does it involve public meetings? And we will, if we believe the task force should look at the case, we'll send it on. Sometimes we'll make a recommendation. And sometimes we will feel strongly that we know how a case should be ruled upon, and we'll put it on a consent calendar for the task force. But that's something that we'll end up discussing. Again, we don't make any final decisions here today. All right. Let's begin. If the petitioner, who's the complaining party, will come up to either, if you're online, you can speak online, or come up to the microphones, and we'll start a timer and you get your 3 minutes, followed by the respondent.
Can we hold a moment while I find out which of the individuals online would like to speak?
Go ahead.
Members of the online community, if you are here to speak on item 5, would you please raise your hand in the app? Thank you. Just a moment. Mr. Vergara, I'm moving you to a panelist.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Right. I'm ready for Mr. Joseph. Mr. Joseph, are you ready for your 3 minutes to begin?
I am.
Your time starts now.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson, and good evening, Chairperson Schmidt and Member Stein. My name is Matt Joseph. I am a resident of Ventura Hill and am deeply invested in access to public records. My background includes large-scale data, software engineering, and open source collaboration. As a result, I'm keenly aware that not all of those who interact with city agencies take this step to improve them. The file before you today is primarily of undisputed facts. Those facts include this complaint is not limited to a particular form of request, as the statutes do not require public records requests to be made in a specific format or through a special form. When responding to public records requests, DBI provides copies of public records as electronic duplicates. The format used is PDF. DBI, as a matter of acknowledged and undisputed internal policy, places end-user restrictions on the electronic duplicates through the use of password-based PDF restrictions and watermarking. The password-based PDF restrictions prevent common actions, such as copying text, using screen readers, and rotating or extracting pages. The watermarks overlay the contents of the records. The watermarks decrease legibility of the valuable record contents and, in severe cases, result in redaction by rendering records illegible. Examples of the restrictions and watermarks are available in the file before you, as you mentioned earlier. These facts are consistent for public records requests via any means, including Next Request and DBI's custom website form. The facts, taken together, lead to the following unambiguous conclusions. The PDF restrictions, by their very nature, are a form of obstructing copying and inspection. Indiscriminate watermarking, by its very nature, is a form of obstruction. In the case of illegibility, they are a redaction, constituting a withholding under the Sunshine Ordinance and the CPRA. Notably, obstruction need not be successful to be obstruction, it merely need interfere. DBI has not contested these allegations, rather they justify them as preventing confusion and mitigating the risk of nefarious activity. While laudable, this justification has no statutory basis. On obstruction, the language of the CPRA is clear. Nothing in this division shall be construed to permit an agency to delay or obstruct the inspection or copying of public records. DBI may alternatively suggest that these restrictions and watermarking constitute withholding rather than an obstruction. However, no exemptions exist for this manner of selective withholding. At this point, there remains only one remedy. DBI must cease obstruction and/or withholding. My intent here today is to use my standing in this matter to improve access to DBI records for all. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I welcome any questions.
Okay, thank you. So next we can hear from the respondent side, if you can step forward, or if you're online.
Mr. Vergara, are you ready?
I am ready. Could everyone hear me?
Yes, your 3 minutes begins now.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Christopher Vergara. I'm the compliance manager for DBI. So DBI believes we have fulfilled this sunshine request, and the requester is in possession of all the records in the format that he specified. Mr. Joseph submitted his request after business hours on November 19th. We sent an acknowledgement the very next day, and the request was for a building permit, job cards, certificates of final completions for all the lots in the specific block in the city and county of San Francisco. So DBI proceeded to compile all the requested documentation, and we fulfilled the original request by the deadline of December 2nd, 2024, in which we submitted all documentation to Mr. Joseph. That very same day, I believe we received an email complaint from Mr. Joseph regarding the use of our watermark and password protection, which is within our internal policy. So he requested that we remove the passwords and watermarks and provide these digital duplicates in a manner that's unrestricted, or justify withholding and obstructing the inspection documents with continuing use of the watermark or password protect. We've never had a complaint regarding our watermarks before. It's simply internal policy to protect the integrity of our documents. So we had an internal discussion. We escalated to executive management, got a determination. So 2 days later, on December 4th, we informed the requester that we would remove the password and watermark for his production of records and send updated copies to him. And the very next day, on December 5th, 2024, we removed the watermark and password protection and sent all the documents to the requester. With that said, we believe we fulfilled our public records obligation, and we thereby closed the request. I understand that the issue here is his argument regarding our policy and the use of the watermark, I can't really comment on the legality of the use. What I can say is we've provided a copy of our document retention policy to the committee. If anyone hasn't received it, we're more than gladly to forward that on. The watermark is placed on each copy of the documents printed by our records management division on permits, plans, job cards, and all of those documents, again, to just maintain the integrity of documents. This policy of the use of the watermark and password protect was and developed under the guidance of the city attorney's office. So we believe it does comply with the law. And that's all I have to say in the matter. And thank you for your time. And I'm willing to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Okay, we may have, now we go to a questioning period where members here may ask questions of the parties. Member Stein, do you have any questions to start out with?
Yeah, I guess I have a few. So for the petitioner, I didn't see in the packet a copy of the original request. I saw reference to it and I saw reference to a later clarification, but I'm wondering if you have a copy of the original request and even the kind of timeline of that request, which I know Next Request makes available, but honestly, I tried to go and look at Next Request and see this particular request, and it wasn't visible to the public. So it's only visible to the petitioners and the respondents. And I think it would be very good to include that in your packet. And also, if you have any, if you could actually include also in your packet, I don't know if you can, because I'm not fully understanding how that password protection worked. You know, were you able to say, for instance, print out a copy of the document that you were sent and make copies of it? Are you not even able to do that with the protections that have been put on it? It just would be good to know, or to be able to kind of see even a screenshot of what was provided to you and really understand what are the rules that are being placed on the material that you had shared with you digitally.
Yeah. If permitted, I do have a printed copy. I don't have the Next Request timeline available. I do have a printed copy of the restrictions as specified when you open the file, should you, if I may approach and provide it to you.
You can just include it so that if this goes to the full task force, then it's in the file for everybody to see, because we're not supposed to look at like new information.
This was included.
The public hasn't seen it for a hearing, but yeah.
It's included, I believe, is supplemental information in the packet. So this is merely the printed version of it. It is available in the file for today. So it's not new information. Just wanted to make you aware that there is a convenient copy available if you need it.
Okay. And I wonder if you can give me more detail about what you could and couldn't do with the digital documents you provided.
Absolutely. So the PDFs use what are called an owner password or PDF password restriction password. The name varies. What you're allowed to do is open it, and what you're allowed to do is print it. You are not allowed to, for example, take a page out of it for use in, for example, creating a report as mandated by, for example, the Planning Commission. You're not able to rotate the pages. You have to physically rotate, for example, your laptop to look at it sideways. If you have some sort of disability, you are unable to use a screen reader, which has its own obvious considerations. You're not allowed to annotate. You're not allowed to extract text. For example, if the text has been recognized as text through software, you cannot copy that for convenience or further use. I would draw your attention to the fact that the restrictions likely aren't the deciding factor here, but the fact that the restrictions exist in the first place and what those are not appropriate for DBI or the city to decide. The law is actually quite clear on this matter. If it is obstruction, it need not be specific in its form. By definition, these obstruct the public. Additionally, I would say that I do have available here both judicial precedent as well as additional sections of the CPRA that make this obvious should those be needed.
Okay, thank you. And then, let's see. I guess for the respondent, so are you saying that all the records that you provide from DBI or from this particular department are watermarked?
That's a question to the
Yeah, to the
respondent.
yeah. To
Yes.
Okay, so everything is watermarked. And can you give an example of how you think a requested document could be misused if not watermarked or restricted?
The question's towards me. I do believe a couple of members from our records management division is in attendance there in person. And they may have more knowledge of the use because they're the ones who actually are performing the response to the sunshine requests. From a policy perspective, the misuse of the documentation is passing off like a document that's that didn't originate from DBI, but it could be like a duplicate that they copied. We want to make sure that the documents that are sent out is verifiable from DBI. If it is copy and pasted, or I mean, if it is used without that watermark, we can't verify the authenticity of it. They could have modified it in some way, changed some data. We just want to make sure it's a PDF, it's the exact copy that we provided. And if it's ever challenged, we could say, yes, this came from our department. And it's not like in another like an Excel format or anything of that nature. But again, I believe my colleagues are there that could probably shed more light into the issue.
And yes, they are here, and one of them has stood up to the podium. And why don't I go to him to speak? And if you could just give us your name again on the record.
So my name is Darren Wu, the custodian of records in records management. So what Chris just mentioned earlier, that is correct. It's to prevent duplicate copies, and so we're able to define what's the original copies that we have in our department.
Member Stein, does that work?
I mean, I would love a more specific example of how you think a non-watermarked document would
Yes.
be misused in what context and.
So we had a couple of examples where customers will bring a copy into us saying it's original, but then when we provide our own copies, it will have the watermark logo, so we know it came from the records management division. That's how we distinguish what's original and what the copy has or the customer has.
Okay, I don't have any more questions.
Okay, my turn. A few questions for each of the parties, and if whoever from respondent wants to speak, go ahead. Even if you both have something to add. Okay, to the petitioner first. Did you eventually get versions of documents produced to you with regards to the specific properties you were asking about, where you could view and read at least the information that you sought?
I did. However, I'd like to make it clear that there are multiple requests, and on each request, it was only after DBI obstructed the original request that I then requested them to cease obstruction. Did they comply with the law? So this is not a singular request. Furthermore, the request merely established standing.
Okay, so you asked them to give you a version that was different from the initial version, and the version you got, I understand it. It's something that you believe may not be sufficient. Excuse me, but the version you got at least conveys to you the data that you had requested, say, the data and information. Is that fair to say?
Ultimately, yes.
Okay. Now, moving back to the initial production. First, let me just clarify. I've heard about watermarking and password protection here today, and those we're both talking about. Absolutely. Is there any remaining issue about encryption, or is encryption issue connected to one of those two somehow?
Yes, to clarify, encryption within the format of PDFs is used depending on the circumstances to enforce or not enforce the restrictions. Depending on the tools that you're using, the restrictions and the use of passwords here are described as encryption. So for example, when removing these protections, depending on the software, or for instance, when displaying what the restrictions are, in the file, for example, is the use of a particular more technical tool called QPDF. That tool, if you want to see what the restrictions are, what you say is, hey, QPDF, the tool, show me the encryption. That encryption includes restrictions and quite literal encryption of the file. And so in this context, it's fairly ambiguous as a result of the PDF standard, but more fundamentally, it's the restrictions enforced via passwords and sometimes enforced via encryption.
Okay, thank you. And in the initial, you eventually got a version of the documents that did not have the watermark, is that correct?
Depending on the request. And so, as I said, there were different requests here. The most recent requests for permits, job cards, as mentioned by the respondent, yes. However, there's an additional request where I did not do that follow-up. And so without my intervention, DBI's obstruction was successful.
Going back to the first time they responded and there were watermarks on the documents, I was trying to see by looking at what you gave us, and I couldn't see that any of the actual information, data, or text was blocked by the watermark. Do you claim that you couldn't see the data or the text behind the watermark on some?
What I ultimately claim is that these are restrictions on my use of these records. Ultimately, it's not up to DBI to decide what those restrictions are and whether or not they are successful. In fact, citing County of Santa Clara versus the Superior Court 2009 case, as a matter of first impression in California, we conclude that end user restrictions are incompatible with the purpose and operation of CPRA. This has been attempted to be claimed by other jurisdictions in California. It is ultimately not up to the agency to decide whether their obstruction restrictions are successful. I make the argument that it is, they make the argument that there's not. Ultimately, they have placed watermarks, that is factual, and those watermarks are intended to instruct the public.
Now, part of your request here today is you believe that even though you received something more useful, let's say, eventually, that you believe that the DBI would continue to produce only watermark documents to other people. Is that what you're claiming?
That is correct. Not only do I claim that, but in their own words, they will continue to do so through requests not received as, quote, sunshine request, which, to clarify, has no specific legal meaning. Additionally, members of the public who interact as part of their regular professions with DBI requesting, for example, permits for the purpose of examining historic buildings, have, since this request has been satisfied in my case, received records from DBI with these restrictions in place and with the watermarks in place.
Okay, thank you. I questioned for the respondent. It seems to me that the watermarks here, the use of the watermarks here, it seems that there's a rough comparison that I could make between that and a certified document. Is that sort of what you believe the watermarks accomplish?
That is correct. I mean, it is correct that it is our internal policy, and we are going to continue to use the watermarks in all our documents that we issue through our records management division. The intent, however, is not to obstruct. It's simply to certify this is an official document from DBI, and this is one that originated directly from our custodian of records, or RMD. So that's the only purpose of it. And we've never had a complaint regarding the watermarks. And if complaints do happen regarding that it's obstructing any data in any form, we would take that on a case-by-case basis, simply as we did with Mr. Joseph. And what we did, we accommodated him by removing the password protect, remove the watermark, even though we didn't believe that it was obstructing any data, but we did it to accommodate his request. And we could do that on a case-by-case basis, but we haven't had any prior incidents of this until now.
Thank you. I think that the watermark issue is a bit separate from the password protection. Is there a, okay, to the respondent first, after this complaint where the petitioner requested a further set of documents that gave him closer to what he wanted, did you remove the password protection in that process of giving him further documents?
Yeah, we produce, so the initial production to him was the standard way we produce all documents, with the watermark, with the password protect. The second production, based on his request to remove the passwords and the watermarks, that was the second production. It's the exact same copy, except it's without the watermark or passwords.
Okay. And you plan to continue to give a requester documents with watermarking and the password protection, other than Mr. Joseph? That your plan is to continue as you were going, correct?
Correct, because we vetted this policy with the city attorney's office when it's developed, and we believe it complies with the law. So we're going to continue use unless a customer comes to us, hey, this is obstructing my view of a document in some way, then maybe we could make an accommodation to remove it in that case. Okay. But here, Mr. Joseph wants to change our policy completely, which I'm not authorized to discuss, and I can't even discuss the legality of it. That would be beyond my expertise. I wouldn't know how to defend those legal challenges to it. But as of now, we believe it complies with the law because it was vetted by the city attorney's office.
Thank you. I don't think I have any further questions. Member Stein, anything?
So I guess I have one question for the petitioner, which is ideally what, you mentioned some of the ways, but I'm wondering, like, are you thinking about this in terms of, being able to manipulate the data to do different things with it, or, aggregate it in various ways, analyze it in various ways? Is that part of what you're objecting to, is that you're not able to do that with the manner in which it was released?
To an extent, yes, but I would say more fundamentally, what I'm objecting to is that it is not the agency's concern to care about the public's use of the records. In my case, I am interested in looking across permits, across blocks, parts of the city from a historical basis that contains very valuable information. But more fundamentally, the CPRA itself specifically says this division does not allow limitations on access to public records based upon the purpose for which the record is being requested if the record is otherwise subject to disclosure. Now, in some cases, that may be nefarious. I think we can all agree that fundamentally, document provenance, integrity of records is extremely important, especially, for example, in a legal proceeding. But it is not DBI's job to manipulate records for the purpose of broad obstruction and withholding for some arbitrary policy of preventing misuse, preventing nefarious purposes. That is not within the scope of the law. And while I can empathize with a historical policy that it sounds like has not yet been challenged, the lack of a challenge to a policy, and a policy that, for the record, is not shared with the public, the inability for the member of the staff to comment on that policy further obstructs the public from changing that policy. There's nothing but obstruction and limitation on end user of these documents. And so while I do have a background in this area, I am very keen in establishing more about our history here in the city, and this prevents me from doing so. I'm also keenly aware of the fact that other members of the public may simply accept that they have to turn their laptop sideways, or that they can't read part of a permit, or that as part of doing their job as requested by another city agency, they have to print a document, rescan the document in order to include it in a file that they are simply resubmitting back to the city and county of San Francisco. This is undeniably restriction, it's undeniably limitation, and it's undeniably obstruction. Policy being unchallenged so far does not make that policy have a statutory basis.
Okay, and you quoted earlier from the California Public Records Act. What section were you quoting exactly?
There are a couple different sections on the obstruction. It is, I believe, 7922.500. And that's the language about nothing being construed to delay or obstruct. And most recently, I'm quoting from 7921.300. And that's around not being able to place limitations based off of public use. I would also call your attention to County of Santa Clara versus California First Amendment Coalition, as decided by a California Superior Court in 2009, wherein this County of Santa Clara actually cited, for example, federal critical infrastructure law as an excuse not to release map data showing waterways. And similar context here, public is the DBI is claiming that there's potential misuse, there's potential downside to doing this. If Santa Clara was unable to convince the court that a terrorist attack was sufficient justification not to release a map, then I don't think that arbitrary, amorphous, nefarious use, whatever that may be, is sufficient justification to override the CPRA.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions from me. Again, we don't make any final decisions here, but in this case, I think we will end up probably moving this to the full task force to decide it. It does have some issues that are within, I believe, our jurisdiction. But now we're going to deliberate among the members of the committee on this. So, yeah, I don't think jurisdiction is really an issue, or else whether there's public documents involved.
I would agree.
Okay, those are the easy ones. What do you think of the case?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how closely the current laws speak to these issues of formats and or the protections that are put on documents and all of that, but I definitely think this needs to go before the full task force and that we need to take a close, hard look at it. So I would make a motion that these are public documents under our jurisdiction and that we forward this to the full task force for consideration. I would also just suggest that if it is possible to put the original request as well as the timeline, which you can also get access to through Next Request, but I can't get access to, that would be useful. Maybe a little bit more of a statement about all of the things that you're restricted from doing because of the particular protections that are placed here. And I guess that would be very useful from the petitioner point of view, I think.
I think I'm on the same page. Just a couple of notes that I'll make, which is my view on this is that a request made for documents that exist. If that is ultimately fulfilled, it may be that there's, a time issue here because the initial production may have been insufficient. But it seems to me that if the existing documents, even if they have watermarks on them, were produced, that may be the extent to which the agency is required to produce information. It seems to me that at that point, the agency has done the job of producing the information, and I think it's a very, legitimate question. But I think that the question raised by Mr. Joseph is, but can I get it in a different format, in some other manner, so that I can use it for some purpose? And I don't know if the document and the information is produced, if there's any obligation to go further and to do something that would enable someone to have more usability of the document. I'm not saying I know the answer to that. I just don't know of any real precedent on that type of requirement. If you do, Mr. Joseph, it sounds like you may be developing that type of argument here in saying that you can ask for something in maybe any form that you want, or in some kind of form that it exists, that you think they should give it to you in that form so you can use it. You actually may have a valid argument on that. I'm not making any kind of decision on that, but I don't know if that's in the law, existing law. But that being said, the watermarks, I'm pretty convinced that the watermarks are like a certification, and if they don't block the information, I don't see that we could, I don't see that we would have a basis under the law that we use to dictate that the watermarks are not appropriate. I think I didn't see any blocking of information, but that's just my thought on the watermarks, and I think that's everything. I think, but let's send it to the full task force. So the motion that you presented, let's just say this simple version of the motion, let's move it forward, as you stated earlier. I will second that motion.
Yeah, so it's just that these are public records under our jurisdiction and to forward to the full task force for its consideration.
All right. So that's our motion that we're going to put up for public comment, and then we'll have a vote.
Anyone wishing to make public comment on item 5, please approach the podium if you're in the room. If you're online, please raise your hand using the app or press *3. We have no one wishing to make public comment.
Okay, so we can have our vote.
Taking the vote on item 5, Vice Chair Stein.
Aye.
Vice Chair Stein, aye. Chair Schmidt.
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Member Sugarman. Member Sugarman absent. 2 ayes.
Okay. Thank you to the parties. it seems that this is a case where everybody's got something quite interesting to say about the issue, and we appreciate your input, and we'll possibly see you here in a hearing soon before the full task force. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vergara, moving you to attendee.
All right, next item, please.
Item number 6. Announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items by members of the complaint committee.
Do you have anything, Member Stein? Nothing? Okay. I just have one comment, which is that this is the second time we've ended up with a single case at our committee. And I think in the future, we should try to figure out when we're, I know that what happens is we start with 5 or 6, and in these cases, it gets whittled down to 1. I think if we know as far ahead of time that we're down to say 1, maybe 2, then we ought to be talking about putting it onto the next committee's calendar. Just because I envision a scenario where every committee is meeting and hearing one case. That doesn't quite make sense to me. We would just cancel our meeting and put it on the next committee, or they do the same to us. Seems a little more efficient. But I know that often we don't know that cases are coming off calendar until the last minute. So that's just not a viable thing to push it back. But let's just be alert to that possibility happening.
Yes.
As long as it doesn't, the number of days between a complaint being filed and being heard.
That is
I mean, like,
often the issue.
beyond the 45.
Yes, yeah. I'm just thinking about like where, say, the next committee is meeting 2 weeks later and we're still okay with time, and maybe they don't have much on their calendar either. Yeah, it may be that we can't really do much about the one case only issue. And it may just be kind of like a couple of one-offs that this happened. We'll see. We'll see. That's all. That's all I have.
All right. Public comment?
Here, public comment.
Public comment on item 6. If you're in the room and you would like to make public comment on item 6, please approach the podium. If you're online, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. We have no one wishing to make public comment.
Okay, number 7.
Item 7, adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned at 6:35 p.m. Microphones are off.